Hi everyone, Jeff from Anatomy and You here, and this is the first in my series of videos about memory tips and tricks. Now, memory tips are so powerful and a really important part of studying anatomy. The idea that studying anatomy is just memorizing a bunch of stuff is a misconception, and if you're just starting to study anatomy, I want you to get rid of that idea. Instead, studying anatomy is about learning patterns, recognizing and applying them. And memory tricks are another great way to avoid memorization. And the best thing about memory tricks is that they're fully customizable. You can relate them to anything that you find interesting. It's all about whatever works for you. Now, everybody who studies anatomy uses tips and tricks, including your professor. So let's get started with our first anatomy memory tip. So for our first memory trick, we're going to talk a little bit about the brain. In order for us to have conscious perception of sensory information, signals need to reach the cortex of the cerebral hemispheres, or the big part of the brain. But aside from the sense of smell, sensory information on its way to the cerebral cortex needs to stop off at a structure called the thalamus, which is found deep inside the core of the brain. The thalamus is an oval-shaped structure, or, as I tell my students from Ohio, it's a Buckeye-shaped structure. It's mostly made up of what are called nuclei. In the central nervous system, a nucleus is a cluster of cell bodies of neurons, so it's not the same as the nucleus of a cell. So while the thalamus is mostly oval-shaped, it has a couple of knobby projections at the back, and these are called the lateral and medial geniculate nuclei. Now, let's take a second to talk about vocabulary and roots here, because it's really important to focus on these when you're studying anatomy. Now, the root of the word geniculate is G-E-N, which means knee. So you can think of the word genuflect, meaning to kneel. Now, we'll find this root in several other structures in the body. For example, we have the corpus callosum, which is a major structure of the brain, and when we look at this in sagittal section, we see it's got a little knobby bend, which is called the genu. And then also in your knee, there are genicular arteries, veins, and nerves. So let's go back to these two nuclei, the lateral and medial geniculate nuclei of the thalamus. Now, in your textbook, it's likely that vision and hearing are back to back. Now, one of these nuclei is involved in hearing, and the other is involved in vision. But which is which? How can we tell them apart? Well, we'll find out using our first memory trick. All right. When we take the initials of the words lateral geniculate, we get LG. Now, when I think of these initials, I think of the company that makes TVs. We watch TV. The word television has the word vision in it, so I think you can tell where I'm going with this one. The lateral geniculate nucleus of the thalamus is the one involved in vision, and the medial geniculate nucleus is involved in hearing. Now, this is the actual memory trick that I use to tell these apart, and this one is a Dr. Jeff original. But the point I'm trying to make is that once you form a strong association that works for you, you never have to worry about memorizing again. So that was my first memory trick. If you like this, subscribe to my channel to see some more. Also find me on Twitter and Instagram at Anatomy and You, and my website is anatomyandyou.com. Thanks, and see you next time.